but things seem so minuscule once you get a second chance at life. It's kind of like, okay, so I can't do that. That's fine. I'll find something else. And my mentality in the situation that I'm in, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to convict. That's already been done. I'm here to provide the best quality of care that I can. And that's my job.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians. To overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be, visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget that CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. I think some of the most profound stories that I've heard since we started RX for Success have come from physicians that have also been patients. And my guest today has just one of those stories. I'm really grateful that he could take the time to share it with us today. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Amos Lane. It's really a great pleasure for me to be speaking with Dr. Amos Lane today, up in the central part of West Virginia, I think. Am I right about that, Amos?
Southern part.
Southern part of West Virginia. Dr. Lane has a really fascinating and compelling story to tell. I can't wait to get to the good part. But Amos, first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. And if you will, let's begin as we always do with a little history of your beginnings. It's my understanding that you didn't really have a lot of medical influencers around in your youth, and early on you had no interest in medicine. Is that the way it was?
So early on, I was going to be a coal miner like the majority of people in my family. It was only through a discussion with my father, who told me that I would not be entering the coal mines, that I decided to go to college, and I thought I would be a physician initially. Well,
now tell me a little bit more about that conversation with your dad. He seemed, it sounds like he was pretty adamant that you just shouldn't even consider coal mining. Is that because he was aware that fossil fuels were going away and he just didn't think there was much future? Was he worried about the danger? Where do you think his mindset was?
Well, I think that, not to talk bad about coal mines, it provided for my family for a very, very long time. But I think it was more of the safety issue that he was concerned about. It's a very hazardous environment, and I think he just wanted me to look elsewhere to help me, avoid the dangers.
And clearly he recognized that you were smart enough to do pretty much whatever you wanted to do. Am I right about that?
Yeah, him and my mom both really always encouraged me to do well in school and to give a good effort. And, I liked sports in high school. So for me to be able to play sports, I had to meet their expectations, not necessarily the school's expectations.
Right.
So I was able to maintain pretty good grades, and then decided after that conversation with him, I didn't really have motivation for it at the time, but, always being a doctor, it just sounded good.
Yeah. Well, what was the next step?
Next step occurred during my freshman year of college. I started as a biology major, and my grandfather died about 3/4 of the way through that year. And for some reason, I decided that I wanted to switch over into the medical field, that I felt that would be a better path into medicine. So I actually switched my major to nursing and received my bachelor's degree in nursing in 3 years.
And I remember reading a little something in your bio, if you don't mind sharing this with us. you were very concerned about your grandfather during his illness, and particularly his discomfort with being attended to by female nurses. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So the general story is he got near the end of the end of his life, and they called in hospice to come in and take care of him. And he actually requested a male nurse because he was unsure of how a female, helping him change or bathing him or doing those kind of activities of daily living would affect my grandmother. And they pretty much told him that in this area there were no male nurses, that they did not exist at the time. So I took that kind of personal, and that was the main motivation for me to switch to the nursing program.
First time I think I've ever heard anybody change their mind from medical school to nursing school. Usually it's the other way around, but that's really a touching story, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. So what happened from there? Sounds like you had your mind made up that was going to be your career at that point.
Yeah, I think initially I did. As I was going through the nursing program and I started doing some rotations, I still had in my mind, the thought of going to medical school, but still didn't really have the motivation for it. So I would go to summer school and get some medical school prerequisites because I couldn't get those through nursing. And ultimately, working as a nurse for a couple years while I was getting those prerequisites and having interactions, physicians are just like anybody else. We have some really good that are motivational, some that are, mediocre and not very motivational. And I can remember several interactions with the physicians and the patients. And I thought to myself, I can do this. And I think I can communicate with these patients better than some of these physicians are, because I got that aspect from my nursing career. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I think I can do this, and I want to do it, and I want to provide better care, and I want to be able to communicate with the patient, not just treat their medical issues, but mind, body, spirit. And so that was kind of my motivation to go into the medical, to go into be a physician.
Yeah, I love that. So how did you take that next step?
Summer school. I kept going to summer school. I graduated from nursing. I immediately went to summer school. I spent another year getting the rest of my prerequisites. And while I was applying and taking the MCAT and all of those sort of things, I decided to work as a nurse for a couple years. So I worked as an RN on a med-surg telemetry floor, plus I did extra shifts in the emergency department, waiting to get accepted. And then when I got accepted, I started my medical school in 2005.
Are you a doctor struggling to provide the best care for your patients while dealing with financial and caregiving matters out of the scope of your practice? Do you find yourself scrambling to keep up with the latest resources and wish there was an easier way? Then this virtual caregiver conference resource will save you time, money, and sanity by giving you all the resources and information your patients need in one place. This conference helps you and your patients enlist the best strategies around healthcare resources and the best financial steps for your patients while navigating caregiving situations. You don't have to go home feeling frustrated and helpless because you couldn't connect your patients with the best services. Find out more at jeanniedoherty.com or click in the link in the show's notes. You don't want to miss this caregiver resource.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. After spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan/MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests. Whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics, Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. And I want to ask you something. It begins to get kind of personal here. Like you, before I started medical school, I did some nurse work along the way. And I quite frankly think that was the best part of my entire medical education. Did you have similar feelings at all?
I would absolutely agree. I would absolutely agree with that, because I think, from a nursing perspective, you are that patient's advocate. You are communicating day in and day out with those patients, so you better be able to communicate well. And I think that was instrumental in, number one, me being able to develop rapport with nurses because I understood what they went through. Yeah, right, people always ask me, would you have taken a different route looking back? And honestly, I wouldn't. I tell people it was the scenic route to be a physician. Right. But I think the impact that made on my career was, huge. So there's no doubt I would never change that.
Yeah, I understand exactly where that's coming from. So, pardon the interruption. Go ahead and pick up the story from there, if you will.
So I had got to start medical school in 2005. I went to the West Virginia School of Osteopathic Medicine. I spent my first 2 years there, in essence, doing, book work and anatomy labs and all of those kind of things, and then went back to the hospital in which I was a nurse to do my rotations as a third and fourth year medical student. Yeah. So that was neat because I knew a lot of the physicians already. I knew a lot of the system and how things worked. So I was able to go back there and complete my third and fourth year medical school at the hospital in which I was a nurse.
That must have been a lot of fun for you, Andy.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. It was a neat experience to be able to see it from one perspective and then be gone a couple years and then come back and see it from a different perspective.
Yeah, hometown boy grows up, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, carry it on from there. When did you decide that the path was going to lead you to emergency medicine?
That was probably the most difficult part. Was I enjoyed so many aspects of medicine, and it seemed like everybody I rotated with, that was my new favorite part. I can remember doing, ICU, internal medicine, loved it. I can remember doing OBGYN, really enjoyed it. I rotated with surgery, specifically a vascular surgeon in the hospital, and I was convinced upon leaving at the end of that rotation that I was going to be a vascular surgeon. And it just seemed like everything I liked. But the one thing about it was what led me to ER was it was kind of like a culmination of all of the other specialties, in one setting. And so I enjoyed the unknown. I enjoyed being the person that ran towards the emergency instead of running from the emergency.
Yeah.
I really think that just, being able to do so many things that I enjoyed in one area is what led me to the emergency department.
Yeah, it really is exciting. Everything is there from labor and delivery to stab wounds to marital fights and things of that nature. You get to see all of what life has to offer, do you not?
Yes, absolutely.
So it sounds like it was a good pick. And once you got into private practice, I gather you felt very comfortable there.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to Charleston Area Medical Center where I did my 4 years of emergency medicine residency to specialize. Following residency there, I ended up taking a job in the emergency department at Princeton Community Hospital, where I also became the medical director.
Wow.
And I have been there this July will make 12 years.
Well, that's a pretty good run.
Yeah.
But turns out that there was one more little roadblock along the way, and this one is a big one. So
yes,
let's hear the story about your illness.
So it was around COVID. It was around 2020, and I hadn't been feeling good for a little while. Just been very tired, no energy, didn't sleep well. I started itching all over my body and just scratching at night when I would sleep. And, I didn't really think much of it. I kind of blew it off. Then COVID hits, and I'm working all of these extra shifts and, trying to figure out ways to where to put people and how to get extra ventilators and, all of the same problems that everybody else was dealing with. And it seemed like my symptoms kind of started progressing, and to the point that, colleagues at work and my family and everybody was saying, you don't look really good. You're losing weight. Your collar looks off. It kept going to the point they're like, you look yellow. It looks like something's wrong. And so it was at that point that I finally said, this can't be old age. This can't be me tired and exhausted. There's got to be something else going on. So at that point, I contacted my family doctor, who, of course, did a barrage of tests to try to figure out what was going on. The lab work came back and showed that my thyroid was pretty much non-functioning. I was now diabetic, and my liver enzymes were through the roof. Wow. So we decided that day that we would treat the thyroid, and we would start me on some insulin to try to get those two under control. We assumed that the liver enzymes were, reactive or inflammatory or something that was going on with this attack on my body. So a few weeks go by, we recheck. Thyroid seems to be trending in the right direction. The blood sugars are way better controlled. But on the lab work, my liver enzymes continued to spike. So it was at that time he decided to go ahead and do an MRI. And shortly after that, we did a liver biopsy, which ultimately showed likelihood of primary sclerosing cholangitis with an overlap of autoimmune hepatitis.
Wow, that's a handful.
Yeah. So, that's the original diagnosis. And, we kept saying likely. We weren't sure. There was some other testing that needed to be done. And ultimately, he was able to get me in with a hepatologist / transplant specialist at Duke University, who confirmed after some further testing, repeat biopsy, those kind of things, that he did feel like it was the PSC with an overlap of autoimmune hepatitis. So at that point, he started me on some immunosuppressants to see if that would help with the autoimmune hepatitis. And we were kind of hoping that the PSC was the less aggressive form at the time, which, at the follow-up several months later, we realized that it was not the less aggressive form, and that transplant would most likely be my only option.
So what are you thinking at that point?
Well, I can tell you the first thing I thought of was it's going to have to be a cadaver liver, because there is no way under the heavens am I going to ask someone to sacrifice their self, their lives, and give me part of their liver. And that was a lesson that that was something that came back and taught me a lesson.
That's a good part of the story. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I was dead set. I was not taking a living donor until it was November of 2022. And if you're from West Virginia, November means one thing: you're in the woods hunting. And so my kids love to hunt, and I'd taken all three of my kids, and they had all been able to harvest a deer. And so now it was Dad's turn. And I was sitting in the ground blind, and I started feeling nauseous, sweaty, shaky. I just didn't feel good. And I stood up and was standing at the window of the blind where I proceeded to vomit. And when I vomited, it was pure blood.
Of course it was.
And so immediately I start going back to my, now I put my doctor hat back on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have varices. I've had a ruptured varice. Well, then I vomited again. So, and this was not my best moment as a physician, because I was like, oh, well, maybe it'll stop. I'm just going to go back to the house, and I'm going to take a nap.
How that happens. Once we become a patient, we just act like patients.
Yes.
So go ahead with the story.
So I go back to the house, and I'm like, well, I'm going to take a nap and see how I feel so I can hunt this evening. Well, I wake up a couple hours later, and as soon as I wake up, I vomit again to the point I almost syncopize, right? So I call my wife, and she's like 50 minutes away. It's like a 10-minute drive I was at my mom and dad's house, from their house to the bottom of the mountain. So we'd agreed that she was going to pick me up there, and she was going to take me to the hospital. So me and Dad probably spend 15 minutes to get down to the bottom of this mountain. Well, she's there. She's 50 minutes away, and she beat us there.
I bet.
So I tell people at that point in time, at that point in time, I get in the car with Jeff Gordon, and we proceed back towards the hospital that was about 45 minutes away. So I call the guy that's on, he's one of the docs that works for me, and I call him, and I'm like, hey, I got some bleeding varices. I'm on my way in, just giving you a heads up. We pull in the parking lot, and all the way across the parking lot, I'm just fussing about this, right? I'm like, this is so embarrassing to go into your own emergency department and be seen. Like, this is ridiculous. I feel better. Just let me go home. Well, any man can guess how that conversation went. That was not a battle that I was going to win. She was adamant that I would go get evaluated, and of course she was right. So we go in the room, we sit down, and I prepare her for what's going to happen. They're going to sedate me. They're going to intubate me. They're going to do an EGD. They're going to have to band me. And so that's pretty much what happened. I woke up 2 days later in the ICU. Apparently I'd conned someone into giving me a notepad and a pen, and was writing novels to people about how I wanted this ET tube out of my throat. And so that was pretty much the first time that I was like, I may have to reconsider this. The defining moment was, there was a gentleman, actually another physician in Huntington, West Virginia, that had a very similar diagnosis to me. And his living donor contacted my wife, Amy, on Facebook and said he wanted to talk to me.
Wow.
So we got on the phone. Yeah. Yep. We got on the phone with him one night.
For something.
Yes, absolutely. It does have positives. So he called me one night. We spent a couple hours, talking about the process and what I was going through and all of this kind of stuff. And what really convinced me was he told me that being a living donor was the greatest thing he had ever done outside of his wife and his children, and that it was a blessing to him. And he told me, he said, if you don't give people an opportunity, you're going to deny them a blessing. And it was that conversation that converted me to consider a living donor.
Mm-hmm. So much truth in that statement.
Yes, absolutely. And so I remember I had a follow-up appointment at Duke shortly after this conversation. The surgeon was adamant again that a living donor would be my best option. And so, Amy and I, we were like, well, how do we do this? Like, how do you ask someone for that? And he said, Facebook.
Yeah.
So
back to Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. We created a Facebook page called Amos Needs a Liver. We put my blood type on it, the Duke referral number, all of the information that they would need. And we shared it a few times, and it just kept getting shared and shared and shared. And I initially thought when we did this that there would be a few family members and maybe a few friends put in for a referral. Come to find out, there were so many referrals that it shut down Duke's Referral Center in my name because they said they couldn't get through the referrals, quick enough. So they asked people to stop referring until they could get caught up on what they already had.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Most people should know that they are easily one of the most active transplant centers in this country.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what surprised me. Like, I actually had a person call me and say, hey, I tried to send my referral and it said they couldn't receive it at this time, that they needed to get through the referrals they already had. Please, submit it at a later date.
So you overloaded the system through a Facebook post.
Yes.
Boy, I'm having to reevaluate my ideas about Facebook. Let's go ahead with your story.
I wasn't fond of it prior to this, but it's worked out in my favor for this instance. They got the referrals and they started evaluating them. And I was at work one day, and one of the nurse practitioners that works for me, ironically, her name is Amy as well. She was like, hey, me and my husband were at the house last night, and I asked him if he wanted to fill out a referral, and he said, sure. So I filled out a referral. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Didn't really think much of it. Some time goes by, and they ask him to come down for further. I think he was one of 3 that they asked to come down for further testing. Some more time goes by, and she's like, hey, do you want to meet my husband, Matt, who ironically worked in the same hospital as both of us, but I'd never met him. He knew of who I was because he knew me as the yellow physician that was in the meetings, but I did not know who he was. And so she brought him down to the ER one day, and we introduced ourselves to each other. We found out through just some idle chit chat that we are eerily similar, like a lot of the same hobbies. We, dislike the same things. But I remember asking him one thing, and it still hits me in the emotions today when I think about what he said. I said, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you even want to consider this? And he goes, yeah, why wouldn't I? The way I look at it is I have one and you need one. So why wouldn't I give you part of my liver? And that just
powerful.
It just hit me. I was like, that's a sacrifice that it's hard to even fathom. And so, a little bit more time goes by, and ultimately he becomes my near perfect match. I think they said it was like 97%.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about transplants, I mean, you're talking about, the size of the ducts, the size of the vasculature, everything's got to line up. Everything's got to be, otherwise you're using grafts and this and that. And it was a perfect match.
And he was right there in your territory all the time. Yeah.
Right there. Prior to surgery, we started hanging out. We still have a text message group between, me and my Amy and him and his Amy that we text almost every day. Where our kids hang out, we do events together. And we became close before surgery. We decided we had to stay within an hour of Duke for 30 days after the transplant. So we got a townhouse and we all stayed together.
Well, and I want to hear some more about how this changed your life in addition to saving it. But what was that? What was it like during that period when you knew you had a donor and you're waiting for the date? What was that like? What kind of things were going on?
It was exciting, but it was also a rough time because it seemed like I continued to decompensate. I kept feeling worse and worse. And honestly, I didn't know it until after the fact. But Matt said when he was down there talking to his surgeon that he told him that if I didn't get a transplant in 2023, I would most likely not see 2024.
Huh. So
that was very rough. Just I didn't feel good. I didn't have the energy to do a lot of things. It was a tough period. There was, the excitement of, oh my gosh, this is going to give me a second chance. Like this is going to give me a chance to see my kids grow, to be able to see their victories and their losses and see my boys become men and walk my daughter down the aisle and, be able to sit on a porch when I'm old and gray and hopefully be there with my wife looking at sunsets. I think it was a period of hope, but I definitely felt rough during that period of time.
Yeah, I bet you did. So what can you tell us about the actual surgical experience?
So day one was a little shaky. The first day was pretty easy for me and Matt. They called our names. We went back, asked the questions, put in an IV, and then gave us something to relax. I think his surgery was about 9 to 10 hours. Mine was about 11 to 12 hours. I remember the first thing I remember is waking up in the ICU to a nurse talking about they didn't know where it was. She was like, I can't find it. I don't know where it's at. And then I heard her say, give me a saline flush. And about that time, my mouth filled up with saline. And my eyes popped open, and I knew, I was like, oh, my God, they're looking for my NG tube. So I'm like hand signaling this nurse and pointing to my mouth. I'm like, trying to tell her it's in my mouth.
Yeah.
And so they had to pull it back, replace it. And that was the first thing I remember after surgery. The night I was kind of awake and asleep on and off, but I remember waking up at periods through the night just feeling like I was restrained to my bed because I had on, a cardiac monitor, had an O2 sensor on, central line, A line. I had a drain from my surgical site, had a catheter, 2 IVs, a PCA pump. It was just kind of like, I can't move.
All the usual stuff.
Yeah. Day 2 started with, vital signs early, nurses coming in to check on me. And then the transplant team came in. I remember they had a lot of questions, how do you feel? How's your pain? Do you think you can get up and walk? In which I responded with my own questions. How's Matt? Did everything go okay? When can I get this catheter out? When can I eat?
The appropriate.
Yeah. After that, it was just kind of a monotonous period. Matt was there for 11 days. I was there for 12. But it was each day we would try to get something out. Can we get this catheter out? Can we get this central line out? Can we get, down to just a cardiac monitor? And that's about it. But it was, getting up early, walking, trying to do some physical therapy, occupational therapy.
Well, it's a massive operation, and
yes.
Your own immunosuppressant drugs, and there are all those isolation precautions and things of that nature. But the way you're describing this, it sounds like you kept your attitude in pretty good shape. I can imagine some people getting frustrated and saying, why did I even do this?
Yeah.
Did you ever have any of those moments at all?
I did not. Honestly, on day 2, I felt way better. My collar had already improved. My symptoms had declined. I immediately felt better. The part that frustrated me the most was I ended up with a perihepatic hematoma following surgery that they watched for about 7 days before they would, to see if they needed to take me back to the OR.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to eat for 7 days.
Yeah,
so
a little bit, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the old Snickers commercials with Betty White, but I was known as Betty White because I was cranky every day because I was hungry.
Deservedly so. And that should have been a good sign right there. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with an expanding intra-abdominal hematoma that had an appetite.
Yeah,
so maybe they learned.
I was ready. I was ready to eat when it finally came time. So I immediately felt better. I would have some good days and bad days, but, for the most part, I was ready. I was excited about the recovery period. Now, poor Matt, on the other hand, he had suddenly got the trauma that I had been going through for years, and mine gradually got there. Yeah. I think they ended up giving me 70% of his liver.
Wow.
So the first time I saw him, he came in and he was highlighter yellow.
Yeah.
He looked horrible. And it took him a few days to kind of get through that. He had a lot of swelling.
Did anybody warn him about that?
They did. We both were warned, but until you saw it, I don't think you really understood how bad bad he was going to look.
I'm sure.
But it was crazy because I looked good at that point after looking terrible for so many years, and then he suddenly looked bad.
Yeah, and losing 70% of your liver, I can see how that would be the case.
Yes. But, we kind of competed we took it upon ourselves to try to, I walked this far today. I did this many steps. We would walk to each other's rooms to the point that they would, when the transplant team would come around, they would just do both of our visits in one room, because it was like, look, anything you need to say to me or about me, you can say it in front of him.
Yeah.
And he was the same way. And it's like, we'll be here. And I think we were pretty entertaining to the staff as well.
I bet you were.
It was, I don't think that I call them the Amy's, because both of our wives' names are Amy. I think, on our bad days, when our liver enzymes would go up, or we would, Matt would turn yellow, or my hematoma wouldn't resolve any, I think they thought we were doing those things on purpose, but, but we certainly weren't. But we were, honestly, I can say that the period of time we were there for the most part was enjoyable, and it was totally okay until Matt got to go home a day before me. And that disappointed me. I was like, man, I wanted to walk out of here together. But he came back he got discharged on day 11, went to the townhouse. He came back on day 12, and we both walked out of Duke on that day.
Wow, what a great story. So you roommated for a while after. How long does one have to stay in the immediate vicinity of the hospital after having a liver transplant? What's that like?
So they want you to be within an hour of the hospital for 30 days.
And so the two families just gathered up in that townhouse to accomplish that. Although I would imagine that your donor was able to actually go home sooner than you did.
Yes, he actually did. He was able to go home earlier from the townhouse than I was able to. But, there was still a good, I don't know, I would say a week to 10 days after that we still were in the townhouse together. We did our walks through the town. We'd go out and do our stretches. We did meal planning and all of those kind of things. The families were able to come down and see us at that point, which was one of the big things you don't really think about. You're going to be gone for a significant amount of time. My wife wanted to be with me, and you're missing out on your kids, and you don't think about your kids are missing you. And so the first time that they got to come down, it was pretty special. It was pretty emotional.
I bet it was. And how long did it take you to get back into your own home?
I came home on August the 4th. So the first full day in my house was August the 5th.
Mm-hmm. Did you get to hunt in November?
I did not. I ended up skipping it. and I'll tell you why. I was going to, but I ended up, yes, I absolutely was. They told Matt and I, they were like, look, you can't go back to work for 6 months. You can't swing a golf club for a year, if at a year. You can't do any working out. You can't do all of these things. Well, come to find out, we're very motivated. We apparently both healed pretty well, and we were both back at work in 3 months, and we just went on a golf trip in March of this year. Yeah.
So
we went on a golf trip.
Back in the hospital seeing patients after 3 months?
Well, I wasn't seeing patients. The transplant team didn't. I was just doing my administrative role.
I see.
They were adamant about that. They did not want me seeing patients.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, but it was, we both recovered pretty well to be able to do a lot of those things.
And still
so it was
hanging
good.
Around together, and you're what, like about 4 months short of your anniversary? Yeah.
Yep. July the 6th will be 1 year, and we still talk, still see each other. Me and him actually had just spoke at our church on Sunday about the process and the experience and how we felt it was, divine intervention, that there was no other way it could be.
I'm assuming that there's going to be a big party.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
His family, the whole shebang.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. Well, what's next for you?
Well, I am in the process of starting a new job. I was the transplant team did not want me to go back and work in the emergency department because it was such a critical area and a high transmissible area. So
I had big wonders about that, and I didn't want to overstep things with my assumptions, but to be in an emergency department, 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, whatever your shifts are, on immunosuppressant drugs. And just an incredible variety of infectious organisms come in. So that would seem to me to sort of rule that out forever, or not?
I'll never say forever, but they were pretty adamant that it was going to be a good while. The two things they asked me not to do was don't work in the ICU and don't work in the ER, because those are kind of the sickest of the sick areas. So, I started thinking, like, what can I do? I love my job. I wanted to stay here. So I'd got some ideas about, creating a telemedicine program, remaining as the director, maybe hiring on a clinical director to deal with any clinical issues. And I would still do, all of the other kind of things. It didn't seem like that was appealing to the administration. They had a couple ideas of their own that would keep me there. Most of those were not acceptable or realistic to me, just based on, in essence, they wanted to utilize me as a mid-level provider or APP or,
Right.
whatever terminology you like for that. And I didn't want to do that because, I was a doctor. I went to school to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor. And so at that time, we decided that we would not renew my contract come July. And they started the search for a new medical director of the emergency department. And they found one around March, and he took over the department. And I am still on as like a consultant if he should need anything, help with kind of the processes and those type things. And I applied for a physician job at the Federal Bureau of Prisons to work there, because most of what I would see and do in that situation is more chronic care and not necessarily acute care. So that would help me to avoid a lot of the transmissible issues, and they've been great. They've been able to work with me. So I am now in the process of, I've been there for about 3 weeks, made it through the orientation, and now I'm just getting into the documentation system and haven't really been able to see any patients yet, which I'm very excited for, because it's been about 18 months since I've practiced medicine. And so I'm incredibly excited to get back into that, because I love medicine. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm excited to see what the next part of my career holds.
Yeah, I bet you really are ready to get back in the saddle.
Yeah.
I think you're probably going to find that there might be even more reward in this kind of work than you might have anticipated. What do you think about that?
I'm excited. I'm honestly excited about it. Initially I was pretty down of thinking that, I went to school and specialized in emergency medicine and now I can't practice it.
Yeah.
But things seem so minuscule once you get a second chance at life. It's kind of like, okay, so I can't do that. That's fine. I'll find something else. And my mentality in the situation that I'm in, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to convict. That's already been done. I'm here to provide the best quality of care that I can. And that's my job. And they deserve that. So that's my approach to it, is I'm going to provide the best quality of care that I can, because that's what I would do in any other situation.
Well, I am really glad to hear that you have found your spot. And I'm really glad that you sound like you're pretty excited about it and really looking forward to it. I have to tell you, this is a unique story. I'm starting to think that maybe we ought to revisit Dr. Amos Lane annually and kind of see how this thing is going.
Yeah, that would be great.
With the transplanted liver. I mean, what a great story. And I'm so grateful to you, Amos, for taking the time to share with us. It's really been fascinating and interesting and inspiring, I might add. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Well, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to do what the show is all about, and that is get me out of your way. I'm going to close my mic for just a few minutes, and audience, Dr. Amos Lane is going to share his personal prescriptions for success.
My prescription for success comes from a social media page that I found, and it's been very inspiring to me through my my process and my difficult times and my difficult days. So this is called 41. In the Bible, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Day 41 came, and the rain stopped. Moses committed murder and hid in the desert for 40 years. Year 41 came, and God called him to help rescue Israel. Moses went on the mountain for 40 days. On day 41, he received the 10 Commandments. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Year 41, they walked into the Promised Land. Goliath taunted Israel for 40 days. Day 41 came, and David slew him. Jonah preached a message of repentance to Nineveh for 40 days. On day 41, God stopped his plan to destroy them. Jesus fasted and was tempted for 40 days. Day 41, and the devil fled. After his resurrection, Jesus appeared to his disciples for 40 days. On day 41, he ascended into heaven. My 41st day, I got a second chance to be at home with my family because of Matt's sacrifice. Ironically, we moved into the townhouse at Duke on June 26th and came home on August 4th, which is 40 days. There was no rain on day 41. It was a beautiful day. My giant was defeated. My test became my testimony. I walked into my promised land. My faith was increased, and my family grew. All of this to say, whatever you do, whether it's at the beginning of your career, the middle, or the end, whatever gets in your way, don't give up. Don't let the hard days win. The rain will stop. The giant will fall. You will enter your promised land. Don't quit on day 40. Day 41 is coming for you too.
Amos, that is more inspiring than I can say, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share your story with us, and especially for sharing your prescriptions. That is really moving. If you would care to share anything else with the audience, email addresses or where to find you on Facebook or any of those sorts of things, please go ahead and do so right now.
Okay. Yeah, I can be found on Facebook. It's just Amos Lane. The other website the other Facebook account that I use is Amos Needs a Liver, which is the main site that's still open. We use it for other people who need transplants or have issues that they want to get out there, because there's a pretty good number of people on there that still see it and share things. My email is moslane98@hotmail.com. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody, answer any questions, or help you any way that I can.
Dr. Amos Lane, thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for being with us on Prescriptions for Success. It has been fascinating and inspiring, and I'm grateful.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to tell a story.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us reach more listeners by leaving a rating and a review, especially on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if your app doesn't have that option, just leave us an email or a voicemail through SpeakPipe at www.mymdcoaches.com/podcast. You can also help by becoming a Patreon member. That link is in the show notes. And we hope you'll also follow our companion podcast, Life-Changing Moments with Dr. Dale Waxman. Special thanks to our producer, Craig Clausen, our promotions manager, Mariana Rodabaugh, and to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.